Welcome again to another edition of the Heavy Hitters Podcast. I am Rocky Boiman, and I'm pleased to be joined today by Josh Sneed, native Cincinnatian, and he's a comedian living right here in our own backyard. He's been on Comedy Central. He's been on Last Comic Standing. His last special, Josh Sneed, Live in the Desert, 2.2 million views on YouTube and other outlets. Josh, welcome to the program, man.
Thank you, man. It's good to be here. I appreciate you having me on. Yes, I do live right in your backyard.
That's great. So let me ask you, the first question I thought of is, when did you figure out in your life that you were funny? And then this is something that you could do.
Well, my dad was funny.
Uh-huh.
It was something I don't know. I picked up on it at an early age that when we were in big crowds with multiple adults, that my dad kind of held court all the time. Like people just looked to him to when they needed a laugh or wanted a laugh, or and I was greatly influenced by Saturday Night Live. I didn't hear a lot of stand-up comedy specifically. Bill Cosby was a huge influence, which is so creepy to say right now, but
That's right. You gotta be careful.
But it's true. He was. I mean, I can't change that,
Right.
even though he's not a good human being. But I was always into movies like Airplane and Caddyshack, like kind of like slapstick comedy.
Naked Gun?
Yeah,
that was
Naked
a funny
Gun.
one when I was a kid.
And it was
yeah.
the puns. It was like the wordplay. Like I've just always been a huge fan of wordplay. And so Saturday Night Live was probably the biggest influence, and that's ultimately what got me to try stand up for the first time. Is I wanted to be on SNL, but I had no idea where I would even start. And so I just thought, rather than move to Chicago to go to Second City or New York or LA, I would just see if I could make people laugh here,
Right, yeah.
on stage by myself. And that was that first time on stage, or that first few times on stage, I just fell in love with stand-up.
Gotcha.
But growing up, I was always kind of the class clown. I played all the sports, but I was never the best.
Uh-huh.
So, any clique of like athletes and stuff, they're always going to have a guy like me in it. That's like, I can hold my own on the field, but I really bring like the fun and funny
The camaraderie
to the table.
and the funny. Yeah, okay.
And, and if we're all trash talking, like I'm going to have the best lines,
Right.
even if I don't have the skill to back it up. So, being a class clown, but also getting really good grades, I think was sort of the genesis of my comedy, and like being able to even make my teacher laugh as she was writing detention slips for me.
Mm-hmm.
That's where it started. And then just trying stand up on a whim is how I fell in love with stand up.
Now, for people that aren't familiar with you, and I've watched a lot of your stuff, especially leading up to this, and you're very good, by the way, and I'm
Thank
tough
you, man.
on comics. I really am. I don't go to a ton of comedy shows, but ones I've been to, I can't ever remember many where I was like blown away. You know what I mean?
Right.
But again, I don't frequent a lot, but I watch a lot on YouTube and things like that. For those that aren't familiar, what type of comedy do you do? I mean, there's, F-word comedy, there's vulgar comedy, there's political comedy. What's
Yeah.
kind of your niche?
I think it's kind of evolved over time. I would say starting out, you could certainly tell who my influences were if you were fans of stand-up. So I loved Stephen Wright as a kid, and so you can see a lot of the wordplay, which again goes back to like even the movies that influenced me. I loved storytelling, which is a big Bill Cosby. I mean, that's what Bill
Right.
Cosby did. And then Seinfeld as a comedian, and his observational stuff of just trying to take things that we all have in our everyday life, whether it's as, traveling or working as a parent or whatever. I mean, I think those three kind of blend to make my style and as what it's evolved to be of being a storyteller who talks about relatable things, and I try to be clever with my writing.
Right.
So that's kind of me. I'm not edgy. I was always taught that you could get more work if you could work clean, and I think it's harder to be a clean comedian.
I would say I would agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's not many out there that I know of that are clean. Like
Yeah. And the ones that are like hugely successful, you know,
Right.
because you can be on TV more, you can take more corporate gigs. I mean, there's so many reasons, but when I first started, the reason I did it was because the woman that ran the comedy club in Dayton, which was kind of like my second home, she said, for my MC, I need to know that I can put you in front of any comedian. So like if the headliner's clean, I can't have a dirty MC. So for me, just wanting to get as much stage time as possible, I wanted to be as clean as possible and as versatile as possible so that I could get as much work as I could. And someone used the analogy, they said, treat cursing like a spice. They said it could make a steak taste really good, but you would never have a plate of oregano for dinner. And that's always stuck with me. And I think it's a good, you know, because there are people who use it as a crutch and that sort of thing. And I've just, you know, I hit a different market. And especially now, you know, I mean, I'm talking about being a dad and having kids and that sort of thing. And like, I don't know, I feel like it's a better fit for my personality to write material that goes along with what I'm like in everyday life versus like trying to have an act that's all, you know, like super edgy or, you know, in the political stuff, it's just, it has such a short shelf life, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's going to, no matter which side you're on, it's going to divide the audience. And between all the late night talk shows and the Daily Show and the Fox News, and someone has done the joke that you write about politics, right? So for me, like I treat the comedy club, I think people come there to escape that, because whether it's the radio or the TV or their social media, they're getting fed that all day from one side or the other, people that they agree with or don't. This is their time to just forget about that, you know? And
by the way, not to cut you off, but what you're just saying is exactly the point I make when it comes to politics being injected into sports.
Yeah.
Right. People get bombarded, just as you said, all week long, all day long through social media, this, that, the other about this and politics. And people are grinding through their day. And when they sit down at an NFL game and they want to watch that thing from 1 to 4 on a Sunday, they want to zone out. They want to get away from all that because they've gotten so much exposure to it. And it sounds like it's similar to what you're saying.
I mean, for me, I can only speak for myself, but that's how I feel. You know, it's just, I don't know. I try to write jokes that can last a long time. Mm-hmm. And so I'm hooked on this new app. It's called Clubhouse. It's like, it's kind of like radio. It's like an audio only social media tool, and it's real time. It's not recorded. So if you're not there to hear it as it's happening, you're not going to hear it. And so my buddy and I created a channel on there that we are trying to recreate a comedy club green room after a show when all the comics are hanging out, busting balls, telling road stories, that sort of thing. And we have special guests each week, right? And so last week we were lucky enough to have Jeff Foxworthy as our special guest. Mm-hmm. And we got on this conversation about politics, and he said he's been doing it so long that of course he can speak to what it was like back then or not too long ago or right now. And he said when he was coming up, people have always had a 15% difference in their beliefs and an 85% common ground. And he said comedy seemed to used to be about that 85%. Right. And then now it seems to be like the 15, like comics want to talk about the things that divide us, you know?
Yeah.
And I couldn't agree with that more. And I try to be the opposite. Like when you come to my show, I want you to not think about anything else except this guy knows me and he knows what I'm going through. And I've thought the same thing before.
Amen to that. And I wonder, I feel like that's hard for comics to do. I feel like it's hard for sports talk show hosts to do it, you know, because it's so in there. I mean, for instance, I like Cat Williams. I think he is hilarious.
He's
right?
Great. Cincinnati guy. Did you know that?
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. But to that point, I've always watched all his specials and just die laughing. But I feel like his latest one, he kind of went more into politics and Trump and all that sort of thing. And I just wondered if that was because he had never done that, but now all of a sudden he did. And I was like, I don't know if that was.
I think Trump is a very polarizing president, so I think he draws that on himself more than any other president would, because he dives so far into the people who support him and goes so far out of his way to rouse up the
Correct.
people who don't like him. So I think that it makes sense it would be that way for him specifically. But I also think that Netflix and Amazon and stuff like that, there's so many ways to ingest comedy now that there didn't used to be, that a lot of these bigger name comedians, they feel obligated to crank out a new special like every year.
Right.
Like that was never the case, you know?
Mhm.
I mean, some of the greatest comics of all time had like 3 specials, maybe, you know?
And they probably worked on those for years and years and years, right?
And so now it's like, all right, well, I put a new special out and everyone saw it on Netflix, so I have to start writing another special. And what I've noticed is with a lot of these bigger name comics is their specials have become much more topical because they know it's going to have a short shelf life.
Interesting.
And so I think that when you're doing topical stuff, it's going to end up being about stuff that's in the news, whether it's politics or, you know, sports or the pandemic or whatever it is. It's like, what are people talking about right now? Because I'm going to write a bunch of material on it. I'm going to record it, and then I'm going to start something else, you know? So I think that's more a sign of just people's popularity as comedians. Because I'm not that prolific, and maybe I would force myself to be if I had that kind of reach, you know what I mean? Exposure. But luckily right now I'm good with just putting out an album every 5 years or whatever.
Right. No, that's good. Have you ever seen the documentary Dying Laughing? Have you ever heard of it?
No.
It's like all the top comics, they talk about just how tough it is and just what it's like being on stage and, you know, practicing jokes, and you get a terrible response, and just kind of how I think, I forget who exactly it was. It was might have been Seinfeld was talking about, you know, sometimes jokes will take 2-3 years to actually write and perfect. I just wanted to ask you about the process. How do you know, when you do your special Live in the Desert, I imagine you done some sort of version of that many times over many years. How's that work?
Well, that one's a little bit different because the place that put it out, Dry Bar Comedy. So like a little bit of backstory on this place. They're like, they aren't anymore, but they started out as a sub company of a place called VidAngel. And what VidAngel did is, I call them Mormon Netflix. And that's basically what they are. They take like Hollywood movies and TV shows, and they mark like nudity and violence and taking the Lord's name in vain and all kinds of stuff. And the people who subscribe to their service, they're based out of Utah, and it's all Mormons.
Right.
They can say like, take out whatever check boxes, and it'll just skip over those things when they stream it, right? And so I always joke that if you watch Game of Thrones on VidAngel, it takes like 30 seconds an episode. Because there's like
no violence.
It's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
Like, why would you even bother? You know, but they wanted to create the world's biggest library of clean stand-up comedy. And so at the time that I did it, they didn't really have a big reach on their platform or on social media. And so I was doing it just to get a good tape. I needed a new solid tape to send to clubs or try to get corporate work. And they do like a 9-camera shoot. I mean, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
And so
I've watched it. It's great. Well done.
It's insane how good it looks, you know? And so I was like, I'm going to do it just for that. And so, when I was talking to a colleague of mine he actually runs comedy programming at SiriusXM now, but he started Comedy Central Records, and he produced my first 2 albums. And I was like, you know, what should I do for this? And he said, I wouldn't do any new material, because you don't know, you know, if Dry Bar makes a deal with somebody, you know, you don't know where your stuff could end up. So you want to keep like your new material with you for your next project.
Gotcha.
Just do material that you've done on other albums or on Comedy Central or something. And so that's what I did. So that special in particular is almost all stuff that has been recorded somewhere else prior to.
Just kind of mashed together.
Yeah, just maybe, like almost like a greatest hits kind of thing. If I could be,
that's cool.
I mean, it's not really, but you know, for simplistically, So I did that, and then sometime in between when I recorded and when it came out, they blew up. they went from only being able to see these specials on their platform to uploading small clips of each one to YouTube and Facebook and Instagram. And what they were trying to do was get people to see this little snippet and then go sign up to subscribe for their platform to see the whole thing. Well, they had such success on Facebook that they were just like, let's just put it all on Facebook and we'll put ads in there, which the contract for me says I get a part of the ads. So they blew up right when my special came out. And so all my clips just went crazy. I mean, on Facebook specifically, like, I have a couple clips that are over 10 million views of just like a 3-minute chunk. And that exposure was getting me in front of clubs and corporations and opportunities that I never had, even being on Comedy Central or NBC, which was really hard to wrap my head around. That's something I didn't care about when I signed up for it.
Kind of, okay, I'll do this.
Yeah, has really elevated my career to something I had been working 7 or 8 years to try to get to through other means, And so I've learned that about comedy, and I'm sure it's probably relatable for you and other things that you're just like, I'll do it because I have time, and it ends up helping you more than you ever thought it could.
Yeah, absolutely. But in terms of just writing getting a series of jokes, and how does that process work? Do you write them down? Do you try them at a very tiny club first, and then if it works, do you gauge the audience?
It's different now. When I started out and when I was just getting started and I didn't have a wife and kids and I wasn't on the road all the time, I'd hit up a lot of open mics and just do 5 minutes here or there to practice out new material. But now it's like, if I'm on the road, and of course all this is outside of COVID, but if I'm on the road, I don't want to drive from Union, Kentucky to Montgomery or Westchester to the comedy club to just try out 4 minutes. So instead what I do is when I'm on the road, I'm headlining, I'm doing 50 minutes to an hour. So I have little spots in my act that I can pull out the material if I want to try something new. Okay. And I usually bookend it by something, I come out of something I know works, try the new material, and I know I have something that works coming up after that, so that I can get a real read on if the new material is going to work or not.
That's smart.
And then eventually what I was taught was like, take your closer and move it to the beginning, and it'll force you to write a new closer. And then when you have that, you move that to the beginning. And then eventually you have an act full of closers, and that's when you're ready to record an album or a special, and then you start slowly taking that out and writing new stuff. So my act is like, it evolves. So if you come see me this year and then you come see me next year, you're probably going to see 25 minutes of new stuff and maybe 25 minutes of old stuff, and then if you come a year after that, it'll just have evolved. You know what I mean?
That's a smart way to do it.
Yeah, because I don't know if I don't have the time or the work ethic. I don't know what it is. It's probably the latter, but to just sit down and I'm just going to write an hour and I'm just going to work on this hour. Like the thought of going up there with doing all jokes that you've never done before, I mean, that's so frightening to me. And plus it's like people have paid money to see a show. They're not paying money to see me work out, like these bigger name comics that maybe would work the Aronoff or the Taft. They'll come to the Funny Bone to work out new material, and people will come knowing they're going to hear unpolished material.
Hear their B-level stuff.
Yeah. But I'm not at that point.
Right.
And so I want to make sure I'm doing a good job for the club, that people leave happy. And then in there, whether they know it or not, I'm going to work out some new jokes. But I never write them out. I never write it out word for word, because I feel like for me personally, when I do that, it sounds scripted and it sounds rehearsed. And the whole vibe that I go for on stage is us just hanging out. Right. So
just to be clear, so you never have like a notebook of like 10 pages and here's all your jokes.
I have a couple words that remind me that I want to do this bit. And what I do is I know how to start it, and I know the punchline. And by making myself do it on stage, it forces me to talk the way I normally would talk in real life. And I feel it sounds more authentic to be that guy that's just hanging out at your house, sitting on the couch, being funny, versus like a polished script that I've memorized and rehearsed, And eventually whittle it down and be more concise, but I'll still be talking the way I would normally talk off stage.
To that point, what makes someone funny or not funny? Or maybe a better way of asking this is, what does someone who wants to get in comedy but they don't, what are they doing versus the person that makes it? What do they do different or not different?
I mean, it's mostly luck, you know.
I've always felt, by the way, I just think someone is, it's a gift, right? I mean, someone can say, 10 people can say the same thing, exact same joke, whatever, but the one guy, it's absolutely hilarious. Everyone has that friend growing up who just says whatever or has an expression, and like, that's hilarious. And the same 5 other friends could do it, and it's like, what are you doing? That's weird.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, I guess so. Yes, but I think you get better at telling the story or the joke over time, and you also just learn. You know, some people call them devices or tools of like, you know, like for me, I'm always been obsessed with timing. Like that's one of my favorite things to do in comedy is like know the exact moment to deliver the next punchline or how long to let a laugh go before I start talking again. So there's not any silence, but I don't step on that momentum. You know what I mean? Like it's a real pace for me.
It's a talk radio thing. Who does that great, in my opinion, is Lance McAllister. He can talk about something, and then there's that pause, and you just like feel yourself leaning toward the radio, and then boom, then he hits you with it. And I try to do that. I'm not anywhere close as good as him, but it's interesting.
He's been doing it a lot longer than you, and you do a great job, man. Yeah. I mean, you're awesome.
No, but that's interesting. That timing of it. Now, who's the funniest guy on the planet right now, according to Josh Sneed?
Oh my gosh, I would say probably Nate Bargatze.
I don't know who that is.
Yeah, see, that's the
have
thing.
To look him up.
That's the thing is like, you know, if I'm on an airplane and somebody asks what I do for a living, now I lie. Now I play this game where I make up an occupation and see if I can talk about it the whole flight. You know, like what's taking you to Minneapolis? It's like, it's a magician convention, you know, or something, and I just like make stuff up and just see if I can get them to buy
how far you can go there.
Yeah, it's really fun for me.
Yeah.
But if you tell someone you're a comedian, they really want to talk about it, you know, and when they ask who your favorite comedians are, it's always people that most likely they've never heard of. And if I ask them that question, most of the time they won't even say comedians. They'll say like funny actors, you know, they'll be like, oh, I love Will Ferrell.
Right.
And it's like, I don't think Will Ferrell's ever done stand up. You know, he's a great actor, but I don't consider him a comedian.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so a lot of the really good comics are going to be people you may have never heard of because they're out there doing comedy. They're not always starring in movies or have their own TV show. So unless you stumbled across them on a late night show or a clip gets shared with you or you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. You've seen their special on Netflix. You may not be aware of who I think some of the funniest people out there are, but that's just because they're out there only doing stand-up at the top level. But Nate Bargatze is definitely one to look up. He's all over Netflix. He just had a new special come out. Bill Burr's up there.
I think he's hilarious.
Bill Burr's incredible.
Sharp.
I mean, so prolific. I mean, the way he cranks out new material is just insane. And he's just, I mean, he's a legend. He's on my Mount Rushmore comedy. I got to go. So in the fall, Chappelle was doing shows up in Yellow Springs outdoors.
Okay.
And you would buy a ticket and you wouldn't know who the headliner was going to be. Chappelle emceed it, and then every show was like a different big name headliner. And so I was lucky enough to go up there a couple times. And one of the nights I went up, it was Bill Burr and Brian Regan, who is another Mount Rushmore. So Regan, Chappelle, and Burr are 3 of my 4 Mount Rushmore of comedy faces, and I saw all of them on the same show back in October and got to hang out after.
That reminds me, that's the time where I saw Korn, Kid Rock, and Metallica at the
go.
Kentucky Speedway back in like 2000 or something.
Well,
like
let's go all the way back. In 1994, I saw Boyz II Men, TLC, and MC Hammer at Timberwolf at Kings Island.
Man, now that's
that.
That's a legendary, legendary lineup. I mean, Chappelle's the guy I kind of grew up with. Just when his show hit, I was about, I guess I was in college, just getting into NFL. This is like whatever, like 2002, 2003, and
Yeah.
that was like one of the first things. Again, I didn't consume a lot of comedy growing up. Certain folks I liked, and I love funny movies. I love Jim Carrey on Living Color.
Yeah.
I thought he was unbelievable.
Ace Ventura is my favorite comedy movie of all time.
I mean, it's every time it comes on is fantastic.
It's one of those movies that, like, the script is, I'm sure, is funny, but when you watch it and you think about the way the movie turned out, if it would have been anyone else, it wouldn't be that movie.
Oh, there's so many instances he just ad-libbed and did something and just caught everyone off guard.
Like Chevy Chase and Fletch is another one that's just like, it's just like a masterclass of comedic acting and timing, and
right.
It's like, I can't imagine anyone else doing this.
Right. What about any of those guys you've watched or hung out with? And I mean, any good stories of those? I mean, are they usually good dudes, or are they
mostly?
Yeah.
I
have to imagine.
Yeah. I got to meet Bill Cosby. I mean, to go back to that again, I was scared to death because this was obviously before I've had anything to be scared to death about. But you know, they always say don't meet your heroes, you know, and and so I heard that he didn't like white people. I heard all kinds of things that just he wasn't a good person. Not what we know him for now, but he couldn't have been nicer to me and my friend when I got to meet him backstage before a show, and he took time to talk to us about comedy. And you know, I've always been of the mindset that you just can't take an opportunity for granted, you know, like you can't. They always say act like you've been there, but I just feel like there's certain times, especially in entertainment, that you just don't know how long you have, you know, and so to really appreciate each moment. I used to tour with the Blue Collar Comedy Tour guys. So when they split up to
that was what, Ron White,
Larry the Cable Guy, Bill Engvall.
Right,
yeah. So there was a group of us, there was about 5 of us that rotated as the opening acts for those guys when they were out doing like giant theaters. And so, you know, I was like young and just I wouldn't say I was cocky, but I certainly was on my trajectory. And I just thought, like, this is my new normal, you know? And I don't know that I really took time to appreciate it as much as I should have, to know what it feels like to be a rock star as a comedian. Like, I'm playing, you know, Charlotte Bobcat Arena in front of 11,000 people. Like, that's not an opportunity that comics really get. Mm-hmm. And it's not one that is sustainable unless you are Larry the Cable Guy. And even if you are, it's not sustainable, you know? So, like,
it's like professional sports. You never know, because people would always be like, Rocky, God, you got to, you know, stop and smell the roses sometimes. Like, I feel like the second you do that, the roses are gone. You know what I mean? I feel like it's got to be the same with you. If you finally go, gosh, I'm on the stage and I made it, let me just enjoy this. Is that the moment you let your guard down?
I don't think it's letting your guard down. I wish I'd done it more, honestly, at this point.
Okay.
Yeah, just because I feel like, you know, looking back, like I even sent Dan, that's Larry the Cable Guy, I even sent him a note saying, like, I just want you to know that if I never relate it to you in the moment, like, I'm really appreciative of the opportunities that you gave me, because, like, the stories that I get to tell from it now, like, blow comedians' minds, especially if I'm talking to, like, guys here locally who have aspirations of doing great things, but they're stuck doing, like, bar shows and Over the Rhine. Right. And it's like, look, man, I was that guy. You know, and I'm sure you were too. I mean, dude, I'm a diehard Notre Dame fan. You know,
did not know that.
Yeah,
until just
absolutely.
Okay.
So, you know, like, following the Irish, like, when I was a kid, my dad was Bengals and Reds, but he never cared about college sports. So whatever my older cousin liked, I liked. And he had a Notre Dame hat. I found out he wasn't even a Notre Dame fan. He just had the hat, but I thought he was a Notre Dame fan. And I was like, I'm a Notre Dame fan. So since I was like 7, I've been diehard Irish fan. And so, like, you, for me, was somebody that's like, local guy, goes to Notre Dame, playing in the NFL. Like, you're it. And you're that guy for for football, what I am for comedy. Like, you can talk to any high school football player here who, you know, whatever part of town they live in, and say, if you put in the work and if you're good enough, you can play anything at the highest level, whether it's college or pro, radio, whatever you want to do, you're not defined by where you're from, because I'm from here too, and I did it.
Exactly. That's certainly
And that's
the same,
powerful.
Same message. Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of just as you brought up college there, do you play college campuses?
Not anymore.
Why? Why? I think I know why, but tell us why.
I think you think I'm going to say because I can't get away with saying anything, and that's probably part of it.
But I also know that, again, you don't do the you do a cleaner form of comedy and maybe less political, of course, too. So
yeah. So
is there another?
My
reason?
material isn't dirty,
right?
And and we can have the conversation about like censorship and that sort of thing, and like being offended and cancel culture and that sort of thing. I'm happy to talk about that stuff. I haven't really had to experience it much because of the nature of my act, but of course I have opinions on it. For me personally, now it's the stuff that I want to talk about. These college kids don't want to hear about. You know what I mean?
Like what?
Like being a dad or working or getting older or getting fatter or what, you know what I mean? Like,
right. Yeah.
And I wouldn't have wanted to hear it when I was in college. So if on the random occasion that some college will be adamant that I come there, I present it as a cautionary tale. Like, listen up. Like, what you're about to hear, you don't think you need to hear. You don't think it's ever going to apply to you. You know, it's like in high school when you're like, when am I ever going to need to use math or something?
Right.
You know, it's like everything I'm about to tell you is something that you'll need to know. So listen up for that reason, even if you don't need to know it now.
And of course they don't, because they're young and whatever, right?
Of course they don't. But that's what I do is and the same thing with like the being offended by everything. I put it on them, right? I say, if I say something that offends you, it's okay. You know, that's okay. You don't have to like it, but if you choose to let it ruin the rest of the show, then that's your fault.
Right.
You know? And so I make it sound like it's their fault if they're offended.
And it is.
Versus like me walking on eggshells around them. You know?
Yeah, I think it is. If they don't like what you're doing, they don't like a joke, whatever it is, don't like your act, just get up and leave. Right? Just or don't come to, or don't tell your friends not to come with that kind of thing. But now it's gone beyond that. Now it's where I think it's today people where they get their notoriety from, where they get their social status is unfortunately like social media. How many friends do I have? How many likes am I getting? How many interactions? All that sort of thing. So I wonder if it's this pressure to go beyond that and become some warrior for righteousness and get some sort of title from it, where they take the extra step now to say, not only do I not like what this joke that Josh said, but I have to tell the whole world, and then all these other people will join in and tell me how great I am for acknowledging that.
Yeah. It's unfortunate for sure, because I am definitely of the freedom of speech, and you know, like there's a joke, like no subject is too sacred to make a joke about. It's just some are harder, you know? But that if you don't find something funny, there's a difference between not laughing and heckling. And that's that's the analogy that I try to use people. Like, if you come to my show and you don't like something I say and you don't laugh at it, I'm cool with that. If you have to let me know that you don't like it, that's where you and I are going to have a back and forth, and you're probably going to lose. You know what I mean?
So if someone does that, will you like kind of go after them?
Yeah. I'll give them a chance to like, well, the problem is like, you know, in like comedy legends, like heckling was like an art form in itself, right? It was like a guy going to the show to try to best the comedian in this battle of wits. And if he lost, he would tip his hat to the comedian and say, all right, you won. Yeah. That's not what heckling is now. No. Heckling is the bachelorette party who has done shots before they got to the comedy club, or some drunk guy who had a fight with his girlfriend at dinner, who thinks he's, you know, who is for sure threatened by him not being the funniest guy in the room, you know, whatever it is. Like, when people get to that point where they're just hammered, like no matter what you say, they're not going to shut up. They're not going to be like, all right, you win. You know, they're going to get thrown out of the comedy club more than likely. So, in a comedy club, I have more of a problem with the censorship than anything because that's like a safe space. That's that person's show and you chose to come to it, right?
Right. Yeah.
Now, if I'm getting hired by Procter and Gamble to come do a show there, or First Baptist Church in Westchester wants to offer a comedy show for their members, like it's on me to be appropriate, right? Because that's them hiring me and me agreeing to whatever rules they've set for the content of the show. It's same for you, right? Like you love the First Amendment, but you're not going to drop the F-bomb when you're doing AM radio, right? Because you're a professional, but that's not because somebody's telling you that you can't say it. You know what
smart, right?
You know what I mean? Right? But if you're at your house and someone says you can't say the F-bomb and you're like, what are you talking about?
This is
like,
my house. Yeah, no, that's a good analogy. Yeah, absolutely. This is my show. You chose to come here. No one forced you. So if you don't like it.
So when Jerry Seinfeld says, I'm not doing a college because they won't let me say anything, and it's like, well, the college is telling you, like, this is what we allow. If you choose to do it, then you need to honor their guidelines,
right?
Or just say no. But they're not wrong for saying this is the kind of show we want for our students. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no. So I have a professor friend who's told me that, obviously he teaches loads and loads of people, as a classroom full of, say, 50 people. And he said, oftentimes nowadays what happens is I'm giving an opinion on something or encouraging them to think a certain way. He goes, I'm speaking to that one kid and trying to figure out who's the one kid. There's 49 kids that are going to have no problem. They're going to say, that's interesting. Let me think about that. There's one kid that's going to have a big problem with it and seek to cancel him. Do you ever find that out in that audience? Do you do your show around that one guy or gal that may have a problem?
Not in a comedy club. And if it's a corporate show, I steer way clear of that line. I just do my act that I know is appropriate and has been approved. And if someone goes out of their way, that's usually the comedy club or the people who booked me for a show would have my back of like, well, you're being a little bit ridiculous, right? Social media, I'm not terribly edgy. I mean, I'll throw an opinion out there once in a while, but I try to just, it's not that I'm spineless. It's just like, it's not worth the risk of saying the wrong thing. Now, the part that is the hardest for me personally is when I'm speaking to the media on behalf of like Cincy Shirts, right?
Right. Which is a company you also run as well.
So, last year our Over the Rhine store got vandalized in the riots downtown, and we were like front and center on the news. We got looted, all our windows were broken, and so they wanted a statement from me, and that's where I really have to think about what you're saying, right? Mm-hmm. Because I know that people that know me, and even the overwhelming majority of people that don't, are just going to see me as like a business owner who's trying to just recap what happened. But I also know that there's somebody that's like, who's this guy? Who's this white guy pretending to be the victim in a Black Lives Matter movement, And right. I appreciate that. And so what you're talking about comes into more play in that situation than anything to do with comedy, right? Because when I'm talking to, Channel 12 or whoever, and they're asking me to speak on it, and they're asking me these questions that are clearly trying to get me to give an opinion, I'm thinking about my kids seeing it one day. I'm thinking about all of the employees that work for us. If something were to happen if our company got canceled, what happens to the people who make a living because of my words? You know what I mean? So I tried to be very careful to say, like, look, it's very unfortunate that we're in this situation with our store, that our store got windows busted out and all of our stuff was taken. But I'm also, as a white man, not in a position to even attempt to understand what daily life is like for African Americans in any city or over the Rhine. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
so it's like I went out of my way to say, I'm not a victim here. Like I cannot like what happened to our store, but also empathize with people who have like issues that I will never be able to relate to and can't pretend to. Right?
Yeah.
And so when I'm talking on those topics, I'm very in my head about
And you have
who
to
could
be.
twist
Yeah,
my words.
absolutely. And that's one of those things where it's often better to say less.
Yeah.
You know, because
And I tried. And they would keep asking. I'm like, nope, just buy a
Oh,
shirt
yeah.
if you want to support
That's
us.
right. That's right.
You can just buy a shirt or listen to my album and I'll be fine. You don't have to worry about how I feel.
So what is in terms of COVID and things opening back up, what's the future look like? I know that had to be a damper, right? When things were closed down, people weren't going to shows. They had to hurt you and those in your line of work.
You know, it hurt a lot of people in my line of work. And I have to be honest that I was very lucky because of the T-shirt company. I also do social media. Like that's the thing about comedy. To go back to where we started this was like, I wanted to be on Saturday Night Live, right? But I fell in love with stand-up. And then falling in love with stand-up and choosing that to be my career has shown me all the different ways that I can apply those skills and monetize them. So it started with T-shirts. Me and my buddy made funny T-shirts that we thought of. You know, it's still that comedic side of my brain, just in a visual form. And I would promote it when I went out on the road to comedy clubs. And that's how we got our T-shirt company started. Then Perfetti Van Mel, the candy company in Northern Kentucky, they make Airheads and Mentos. Yeah. They reached out to me and said, we want a comedian to run our social media for us because we think it'd be funny if like people responded to the people would like talking to, you know, someone funny on Twitter instead of, you know, like a brand.
Mr. Corporate Guy. Wendy's does that, aren't
they?
They're
Wendy's is amazing. I mean, they're
really
like
good.
incredible. Like I wish Airheads would unleash me the way that Wendy's has unleashed their person, but no one knows it's me. Right.
Right.
But I've been doing Mentos and Airheads social media for 8 years and nobody knows it's me. So I said all that to say that this past year, I was very lucky to have alternate sources of income that still are kind of rooted in comedy, even though I couldn't do shows.
Smart. Very smart.
And I tell guys that all the time. I told them before, not because of a pandemic, but just like diversify yourself. Make it so that you don't have to do stand-up. Because as soon as you have to do stand-up, you start hating stand-up. You know, you're begrudging having to be on the road.
It doesn't become fun. It becomes, this is my job and I have to do it versus something you just, hey, I just really like doing this.
Right. Because I saw it all the time when I started here at Go Bananas. You know, I'd see these guys have been on the road for 30 years. They have no personal relationships. They don't know their kids. They're divorced. And it's like, I didn't want that. I wanted to be able to take summers off. You know, I want to be able to, you know, work a week or two a month and be good with that. And so, so I was very lucky during the pandemic. It was tough not to do shows, but I got by. And so now that things are opening up, you know, like I've gotten my shots and I was in Minneapolis last week. I'm headlining in Vegas in August. And I think after that, it'll go back to a normal schedule. But I firmly believe that a big boom is coming in the stand-up comedy business, probably in a lot of forms of entertainment, but specifically stand-up. Because it's kind of cyclical, and the 80s had a crazy boom. I mean, there was a time where there was 4 comedy clubs in Cincinnati that were all busy. Mm-hmm. And it kind of died down. But what I think's happened is I think the pandemic has not only have people craving to be back at like live performances, but I can certainly attest that it has introduced people to a lot of stand-up comedy, maybe for the first time, or certainly comedians they've never heard of, because everyone's been at home.
Yeah. So what do? You pull up a clip on a social media site.
Yeah, you get shared. Exactly. Right. And so I've gained more fans not doing comedy.
Isn't it funny how life works?
It's crazy.
When you like work your ass off and do this and grind, and like, oh my God, my following, I don't feel like it's getting any better. And it's like that, what's that movie? Is it Forgetting Sarah Marshall where the guy's like, no, do less, right?
Yeah.
We're talking about the surfing. No, you're doing too much. Yeah, sometimes you do less, you let it go, and things work out, man.
It's exactly what's happened. And so I'm excited about coming out of this for reasons like everybody else.
And people got to be hungry, like you said. They've been cooped up in their house for a year. Let's get out. Let's interact with people.
Yeah.
There's nothing better. I mean, I've talked about it all the time, but Zoom meetings, and everyone's done that, and those are the worst thing ever. And I know they save time, and I know they're more convenient, but the chemistry is zero.
100%.
Zero.
I had friends that I understand why that was their only option. Like,
Right.
I had friends that did stand up over Zoom, and it's just like, it just sounds like an absolute nightmare because, like I said, I'm a timing guy. So I want that interaction from the audience to know when to deliver the next punchline.
And you can't feel that over the internet.
You can't. And so I'm very excited about the future for me personally and the business as a whole, because I think once everybody's comfortable being back outside, that these clubs are just going to be sold out all the time of people that they need to laugh, they need to be out, they need to be around other people, and they've learned about some people that maybe wasn't on their radar before the pandemic.
Right. Well, look, man, this has been great. If folks want to find out more about you, where can they go? What can they, if they want to see where you're playing next, what can they do?
Yeah, I would say just joshsneed.com. It's SNEED. Just go to joshsneed.com. My tour dates are on there. There's video clips on there, and there's links to all the social media. So if you want to just find me on social media, I'm on all of them. And of course, locally with Cincy shirts. Check out the stuff we do, because I'm very proud of all the stuff that we do there, and all the charities and stuff that we get to help out. So this city's given so much back to me, and I know that people outside of Cincinnati will listen to this, but specifically like I'm just such a homer, and I've chosen not to live in LA or New York because I love it here. So I'm just going to keep grinding, and hopefully you'll do the same.
Yeah, man, absolutely. Well, best of luck to you. Keep on doing what you're doing, and thanks for coming